outside of Georgia, because Georgia has won 2 national titles in the last 3 years, so it feels like it's fair for us to not factor them into this equation. Who is a team that will be the next force in college football? And I mentioned it in the open of this live show. We're defining the word force as a team that could win more than one national title over the next decade. So there's going to be some teams on this list now that you say, JD, they're on your list to win a national championship? Hey, we're working with a 10-year window. So I'm not calling my shot for them to win the national title this upcoming season, though one of these teams may end up being that team when we get to prediction time. But it's more so we're working with that 10-year projection, who has a chance to win not just one but more than one. So Florida and Urban Meyer, obviously one of those teams that did it. Bama under Saban, Kirby and Georgia, we mentioned already. I had to put this list together in groups, not tiers, but groups, because I think that's probably the most comprehensive way for us to unpack this list. And the first group of teams I'm going to talk about here is just the layups. Like, I put this question out, and this was the group of teams that just, one, I was already thinking about, and two, y'all were right in lockstep with me saying this team, this team, this team. And so one of the teams that we heard about most frequently and was one of the first teams we thought about, the Ohio State Buckeyes. And a lot of folks now are falling victim to punchline culture. Nobody on this show, nobody who tunes on this show is falling victim to that. But a lot of folks are very quick to say, well, Ryan Day, he's not the guy. He's not this. He's not that. 0-3, third base, this. Like, there's a lot being made about Ryan Day. All I'm going to say here is, do not be surprised how quickly a narrative can shift within the course of 1 year. Because Jim Harbaugh now, it was also being said about him how he couldn't beat Ohio State, and is he the right guy? Guy got his salary reduced, for crying out loud. If Ryan Day beats Michigan and wins one national championship, that will be the spark that lights a wildfire. Because look at what they're doing on the talent acquisition side of things. They're already knocking it out of the freaking park, man. I mean, they're just doing numbers on that side. I mean, the portal, obviously, with Caleb Downs and Quinshon Judkins and Will Howard, and on the recruiting side, right now, as we're live on the air, they have the top-ranked class in 2025. More on that later in the show. There's already a strong draw to the brand that is Ohio State. But if they get one national title, they're going to have a chance to do it this year. Look at the odds in Vegas. They are the second-best odds to bring home the trophy in Atlanta when it's all said and done on January 20th. Again, don't be shocked if things take a quick turn and Ryan Day has success, Ohio State has success at the highest level, and then they start reeling them off here. They're going to be a force if that happens, and have to be talked about when it comes to the potential forces this upcoming next 10 years in college football. Here's another one, and there's probably some recency bias baked in here with how well they've recruited. Oregon is majoring in everything that is required for high-level success in college football. Like, it used to be you had to be in certain regions of the United States to acquire talent at the highest level. I believe NIL, and quite frankly, having a private jet has changed the game quite a bit. Oregon has a head coach, as we've mentioned many times on this show, that is not just prioritizing, but executing when it comes to recruiting. They're fighting for a top 3 class. I believe they're number 4 at the time of us being on air right now. But I'm just saying they have a coach who I believe is nowhere near his best football just yet in terms of what he's going to be long-term. I mean, he's had 2 seasons under his belt so far. He's got 5 losses to 3 different coaches, one of them being Kirby Smart and one of them being Kalen DeBoer, who's now at Alabama and who competed for a national championship last year. And the other head coach, he beat the brakes off of last year at Oregon State and Jonathan Smith. That's not throwing shade at Jonathan Smith. I'm just saying if you're buying stock in a head coach and you're buying stock in a roster, I think Oregon's a good place to look. Also, it's worth noting, too, that that brand, not just the O, but also that Nike check that is on their uniforms, that's going to continue to factor in. And the way they are getting after on the recruiting trail, we mentioned that already. They went out to the state of Texas and landed Ja'Corian Moore, the top wide receiver in the country, on 4th of July. I think that's a sign of the times, and I think that's also Oregon being a little bit more so changing with the times and being able to recruit at the highest level. More on Oregon as well a little bit later in the show. I think Texas also in that same vein, I think Texas is built perfectly for modern college football. Similar to Oregon, major brand. The difference with Texas is You don't got to jump on a private jet to go see the top prospects in America. Like, you just drive down the road, jump on I-35, you can see a lot of the top dudes. Heck, a lot of the top dudes are in your backyard. And so that fertile recruiting ground, plus the fact they have that Texas brand, plus the fact they got the SEC sticker on the back of their helmet now, and a lot of kids want to be in that conference. That's going to bode well for them over the course of the next couple of years. Also does not hurt. And one of the reasons why I think they're a layup for this conversation is they have a quarterback whisperer at head coach. And you've heard me talk many times on this show how I believe that the future of college football is going to be even more quarterback-centric, more quarterback-driven to have success. Steve Sarkisian majors in quarterbacks. Like, he landed Diabell already on the recruiting trail for the future class. He's got Arch Manning on campus. Quinn Ewers coming back for another season. Steve Sarkisian's got a resume that speaks for itself with previous quarterbacks he's worked with. Like, he's going to get the quarterback right. And one, that's going to give you a chance to succeed every single Saturday. Two, that's going to attract top talent to come and play with those kind of quarterbacks. Okay, receivers, they want to see the football a fair amount. Having a guy like Arch Manning on your roster helps in that effort. Defenses, they want to know, when we give you the football back quarterback, we're going to get a 3-and-out, you get the ball back, you go score. Like, we're not wasting our time out here playing defense for you. So I think with all that being said and all those things boding well for Texas, speaking of Steve Sarkisian too, I think he is on the front end of kind of finding his flow, kind of finding his rhythm. The way that Texas is crushing it on the recruiting trail and the way they're crushing it in the portal, you have to imagine has something to do with NIL. I think it'd be foolish to tell you that it was, all NIL fueled, but they're definitely using it to their advantage. Look out for Texas, man. Look out for Texas. I'm just saying, if you were to do a team that is kind of created for modern college football, the brand, the head coach, the roster, all those things, I think they're just getting started, and I would not be surprised in the slightest if they won a national championship in the next 10 years. Wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if they won more than one in the next couple of years. So those are the teams that I think are all layups. You got Ohio State, you got Oregon, and you got Texas. They, to me, are absolutely probably the first teams considered when you talk about teams that will be forces in the future in college football. Now, this next group I want to talk about, I would classify them as there's too much within the roster or around them or resources to not consider as a potential force in college football over the next 10 years. And I'll just say this, I think someone in the Sunshine State is just primed to go do something big at a very, very high level. Like, on the national scale, they're primed to go do something big. Florida State is in a unique position where they are, in some ways, waiting for recruiting to catch up with the on-field product. Like, Mike Norvell now has had 2 seasons where he has crushed it. Had a double-digit win season 2 years ago, had an undefeated season last year in the regular season, won the ACC. And when you win, it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation. Does winning attract recruiting, or does recruiting then equate to winning? Like, it's a tricky situation to figure out. I will say this, you have a home run at your head coach, and Mike Norvell, I believe, is the guy to lead them into the future. This is a very big year for Florida State, because if they have success like they did last year, and you've heard me talk about this before on this show, if they have success like they did last year where they win the ACC, if they do that this year, they will be in the college football playoff, no Sunday selection drama. That will, in a lot of ways, validate everything Mike Norvell has done there, because previously it was, well, okay, he portaled in some guys. He's trying to get the roster right. Hey, he had Jordan Travis. He got the most out of him. You had some guys on the defensive line that were NFL guys. A lot of those guys are gone. How many times have you heard me say throughout the course of this spring and into the summer, Florida State 83rd in returning production in the country? Jordan Travis is gone. Those NFL dudes are gone. Keon Coleman, he's gone. And so if you have success like you did last year and the year before, you point to the common denominator and say, okay, that's Mike Norvell. And I think Mike Norvell could go on the recruiting trail at the high school level and, I believe, land a top 10 class. Because a lot of people are saying, hey, never had a top 10 class. Okay. And he beat your team. What happens when he gets a top 10 class? What happens when that recruiting does catch up with Florida State? I think that is dangerous, and I think that would open the floodgates for them when it comes to acquiring more talent at the high school level. And then you pair that with the portal, Florida State would be cooking. So too much there for Florida State, I think, to not be considered in this conversation. Staying in the Sunshine State, I think Miami is in a unique position. And in some ways, I feel like they're almost the inverse of what Florida State has been. Because I said Florida State, the on-field recruiting, the recruiting needs to catch up with the on-field product. I think for Miami, the on-field product needs to catch up with recruiting. And honestly, when you look at the equation, getting players and then having success makes a lot more sense than having success and then getting players. So the equation is working in their favor. This year is massive for them when it comes to the next 10 years at Miami. And we've said this before on this show, but I'll tell you again. The opportunity of having a guy like Cam Ward at quarterback for you is two-faceted. The first is you can win a lot of games. Like you look at what they have a chance to do this year in the ACC, a lot of folks are picking Miami to win that conference. Win the conference, get in the college football playoff, all bets are off from there. The second part of this is if Cam Ward goes out and balls like I've told you I think he's going to ball. I think he's going to have a top 5 season statistically in Miami football history. If he does that, there's going to be a lot of cats that are either in the transfer portal or at the high school level that play quarterback and say, man, that offense Shannon Dawson runs, that's pretty fun. Man, the way they're recruiting skill players, I might want to go play over there. I'm just saying now, putting that kind of exhibit for future classes on tape, that would mean something, and I think that would have them off and running. Again, the resources, the talent around both Miami and Florida State, there's too much of that for us to just assume they're going to stay at a mediocre level if you're Miami, or if you're Florida State, assume they can't elevate to a national championship kind of level yet again. So both those schools, I believe, have a very real chance to be forces in college football based on their resources and based on where they're situated and based on, quite frankly, the way they're trending. Now, LSU is the last team in this group I want to talk about. LSU is a rocket ship that's already been to the moon. Here's the thing, too. They've been to the moon with, not to throw shade, lesser caliber of head coaches based on winning percentage. Brian Kelly has a better winning percentage than both Les Miles and Ed Orgeron. Again, I have nothing bad to say about either coach, but you're telling me that I have a head coach that's more capable and has the same resources and now has an expanded playoff where you don't have to get through Alabama to make the college football playoff, though Brian Kelly has gotten through Alabama in his 2 years in Baton Rouge, worth noting. When Bryce Underwood gets on campus, and I'm not throwing any shade or just looking past Garrett Nussmeier this year, I think LSU is going to be really good. I've gone on record. I think they're going to be a lot better than maybe the national opinion is on them right now. When Bryce Underwood gets on campus, I'm just telling you he's different. I don't want to put too high of expectations on him before he even suits up for LSU. Dude's special. So when he gets there, too, there is going to be a pretty sizable window for him to make something happen. The way they're recruiting in 2025, too, under Brian Kelly, they're going to be, I believe, within that top 5 on National Signing Day, if I had to guess right now, or they'll at least be in that top 10, which would be par for the course for him at LSU. The resources, the fertile recruiting ground, the brand, what appears to be resources for them on the NIL front based on how well they're adding talent on the recruiting trail and how I think they're going to address the portal. Like, they're in good shape. They're in good shape, and I think they have a special player on the way in Bryce Underwood. So LSU, there's too much there for them to not be considered as a national championship contender over the next couple of years in college football, along with Miami, along with Florida State. There's too much there for them to not be considered in this discussion. So those are the two groups right now. You got the layups, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas. You got there's too much there for us to not at least consider them in LSU, Florida State, Miami. And then there's also this group that I think is appropriately labeled. We would be foolish to not include them. And the school I want to start with in this category, how about Alabama? Well, JD, Nick Saban's gone and Kalen DeBoer's never been in the SEC. Y'all, I'm with you. I understand. I'm right there with you. I think I picked against Washington every single time last season until the national championship game, and then I picked them, and then it went how it went. But you hear what I'm saying here. Other people have won national championships, not named Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer is 104-12 as a head coach. All right, say what you want about him not being in the SEC just yet in his career. I think he's going to be okay. I think he's going to be more than fine when it comes to drawing up some ball plays, all right? The question was, can he recruit? National signing day is a ways away. But if we're looking at the numbers right now, Alabama has the number 2 ranked class in the On3 industry team recruiting rankings. All right, so if we're going to go ahead and trust the early returns so far, Kalen DeBoer is recruiting just fine. And we'll talk more about Bama recruiting a little bit later in the show. The question really is, how does that defense formulate? Can they put a national title defense on the field? Now, to me, I think it'd be foolish to tell you that Kalen DeBoer can't do that. So far, he's been successful everywhere he's been. Alabama, we would be foolish to not at least consider them to be a force in the national championship picture over the course of the next 10 years. I wouldn't be surprised if they went and won multiple national titles in the course of the next couple of years. Again, Kalen DeBoer, 104-12, competed for a national championship last year with Washington's roster. Now, Washington had a good roster, but I'm just telling you, what he's going to have access to at Alabama, it's going to be better. I'll leave it at that. One more team I want to include in this category, though we would feel foolish to not include them as a potential force in college football going forward, the Michigan Wolverines. And a lot of y'all that are in Big Ten country just turned this thing off and said, are you kidding? JD, come on, man. Like, they're not winning the national championship next year. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about over the course of the next decade, there is a very high confidence level internally in Ann Arbor that Sharon Moore is going to keep a good thing going that Jim Harbaugh had rolling. And I think there's also this perception that Jim Harbaugh was, kind of the end-all, be-all with what they did internally there. And Jim Harbaugh deserves all the credit and then some for Michigan winning a national championship. That's not me trying to take anything away from him. But I do think it deserves to be noted that national championship team from last year, Sharon Moore has his fingerprints all over that thing. Not just from a play calling perspective. I'm talking about from a game planning perspective. I'm talking about from a culture perspective. That's still in-house. And even though there's some players that, made that happen last year that are gone to the league, in fact, a pretty healthy dose of those guys, Michigan, right now, flirting with a top 10 class. Y'all, Michigan has been a developmental program over the course of the last, 10-ish years. If they start adding a higher caliber of player and then are able to uphold that development structure that Sharon Moore in a lot of ways was a part of, Michigan's going to be a force. Like big people moving ball people, winning the line of scrimmage, playing good defense. The scheme's going to change a lot throughout the course of the next couple of years in college football from school to school, but that formula that Michigan has, that is going to continue to be successful. All right? It's like your favorite sauce in the fridge. Like it never expires. Okay? So Michigan would not be surprised in the slightest if they won more than one national title over the course of the next 10 years. So that's the smaller category here. I'd feel foolish to not include Alabama and Michigan as potential forces in college football. Now, one more group I want to get to here. And this is one that you could probably lump a lot of teams in on. Like you could probably throw Penn State into this group. You could probably throw a team like, I don't know. I suppose you could probably throw teams in the Big 12 like a Utah into this group. To me, this wild card group that we're going to talk about right now has 2 teams in it. And the first is Ole Miss. And Ole Miss, I believe, it's obvious why it's hard to sell you on Ole Miss right now. Say, because, JD, they go to the portal. They're going to have a new roster every single year. They're going to probably be pretty volatile when it comes to the talent level they have. It's understandable. I hear you on that. Lightning doesn't strike the same place twice. Common expression. However, that expression is actually not true because whenever lightning strikes one place, there's some voltage, for lack of a better term, that's retained from that lightning strike. Meaning when lightning, rolls around again, there's a pretty decent chance it's going to eventually strike that place again. And so I say all that to tell you that Ole Miss, if they win one national championship, if lightning does strike with the right portal class for Lane Kiffin, who's to say there's not some carryover? Who's to say that doesn't juice them up a little bit at the high school level when it comes to recruiting? It would definitely boost them when it comes to what they do via the portal, which is saying something because they're already, for my money, one of the top 2 and potentially not 2 when it comes to what they do at that level. It's not that wild a thought that they could find a 2-season lightning strike kind of ability within a 10-year window. Now, they haven't won the national title since 1962. They haven't won the SEC since, I believe, the early 70s. So, yeah, it would take something. It would take a little bit of something. Actually, I might be wrong there. I think it's early 60s. Bottom line, it's been a minute. It's been a minute for Ole Miss, and if it hits with Lane Kiffin, don't be surprised if it happens another time in a 10-year window because of what that would attract. Now, the last wild card team here I want to talk about for potential forces in college football, it's tricky. It's tricky, but I think it's Tennessee. And the reason why I say it's Tennessee is how much I've talked about, hey, got to have the quarterback right. You got the quarterback, you got a chance. Well, we can't tell you how important the quarterback is and then look at what Josh Heupel's done when it comes to recruiting the quarterback position and just disregard that. So if for no other reason than I think Nico Iamaleava is going to be an absolute stud in Knoxville, Tennessee has a chance to be a force. And it's not just the quarterback position either. Look at the way Tennessee's built this roster since Josh Heupel's got there. Y'all, they're going to have a top 15 pick on the defensive line next year in James Pierce. They will. Like, he might be, if you ask me, I think he is the best edge defender in college football. So I think Tennessee, with the way they're trending, with the way the college football playoff is expanding, do not be surprised if they end up catching lightning in a bottle a couple of times and find themselves as a national champion. And again, if it happens once, to me, that second one becomes that much more attainable. Now, the second climb would be harder, especially if you're going for back-to-back. All that's true, but I think you talk about wild card teams, Ole Miss and Tennessee have the capability to get it done. So let me know who we missed there. We went through a variety of teams with a variety of different qualifications there. But to me, those are the teams that I think have a chance to be forces in college football over the course of the next few seasons. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.